The people that hacked the radio stations just played this rap song that I never heard of because I'm the whitest person ever, called Fuck Donald Trump. And hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going well, dude. How are you?
I'm good. It kind of feels weird recording on a Thursday.
Yeah, I don't know that I like it too much, but because I mean, we both work tomorrow, so we kind of have that hanging over our heads, I think. But fortunately, this weekend it's all we could do.
Yeah, for sure. I have a show tomorrow. Not that it makes a difference to you guys listening because it'll be over by the time you listen to this. But I have a show. We normally record on Friday nights, and I have a show tomorrow. So we kind of had to do it tonight. It was funny because I was kind of waiting for you to come over, and I saw something on Facebook that made me proud for like the first time ever to live in Evansville. Oh, yeah? Apparently, there's several radio stations that got hacked, either earlier today or maybe it was yesterday, and Evansville was one of them. And apparently, the people that hacked the radio stations just played this rap song that I never heard of because I'm the whitest person ever, called Fuck Donald Trump. And so I thought that was hilarious. Apparently, they played it on a loop, and the one in Evansville, I guess, played for like 15 minutes before they figured out how to shut it off.
That's crazy.
And I actually watched the music video, at least like 30 seconds of the music video, because that was about all I could take. But yeah, it's pretty bad.
What do you know? What radio station off the top of your head?
I don't remember. I mean, I read
Is
the
it
article.
Like one of the bigger ones, though?
I don't think so.
Still, it's worth it.
Yeah, we try not to get too political on the podcast, but given the fact that we just got a really shitty comment on our Facebook post, one of our Facebook posts, I think we should kind of put it out there, make it kind of clear where we stand. But yeah, I was pretty proud to live in Evansville, at least for one day.
Were the people that hacked from Evansville, or was it just...
I think that they said something about how there was like something like a backdoor and some IP address. I don't know how all that shit works. So I guess they would have had to have been the person that hacked the Evansville one would have had to have been from Evansville or at least some surrounding area. I know that there was like 6 other radio stations that they listed in the article that I read from various places around the country. So,
I mean, as bad as Evansville is in that regard, there is like, you know, a liberal audience here. It's maybe not the biggest as some cities, but it's here. I mean, you did your stand up at PG, and I feel like that bar in Lamasco's and a couple other bars in that area, you kind of see that side of Evansville, or maybe like someplace else that you're doing your show tomorrow night.
Yeah,
you see that side of Evansville, and it's not as prominent, but it's good to know that we're not alone in this wretched city.
For sure. I just got a kick out of it because I listened to the song and I could just imagine all of the tight asses that live in Evansville that would have been listening. Because who listens to the radio nowadays?
Yeah. Hopefully it was like a country station or something.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That'd be the best.
Oh, yeah. So if this is your first episode, we normally just start off by kind of checking in with each other. Tyler and I are pretty busy nowadays, and we don't really get to have the nerdy conversations we used to get to have. So we like to kind of check in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
I went and saw a movie that I wasn't expecting to go and see.
Okay. Split?
Exactly. Split.
Oh, I did. Yeah. I was just taking a shot.
Yeah, that's the movie. I went into this movie with probably the lowest expectations possible. I mean, how many times can you be burned by the same filmmaker and go in expecting quality stuff?
I trust your opinion, but there's no way that you're going to convince me that this movie is good. No fucking way.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
So, some people were saying, and I did notice before I went and saw it, that this is Shyamalan's resurgence, which started with The Visit. But if you listen to if you listen to our review of The Visit on the podcast from about a year ago, actually, you'll hear that we disagree with that part of it wholeheartedly. But this movie in particular did start gaining buzz, and it was something that my wife Brittany wanted to see. So I was kind of not dragged to it because I'll go to see almost any movie willingly, but I was willing to give it a shot. And I will say, I'll get into specifics, but I was pleasantly surprised. I'd say out of my favorite of his movies, this is probably his fourth best.
Okay.
It's behind, the three obvious, for me at least, Sixth Sense, Signs, and Unbreakable, which I like. I like those three more than
you would put this over The Village?
Yeah, I need to give The Village another watch. I haven't seen it in a long time.
I think that's severely underrated. I think because he was so popular back then, people shit on that movie because it wasn't as good, but I still think it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I need to give that one another shot, but from what I remember, I definitely say that this was better than it.
Okay.
At its core, Split is a really great suspense movie. It gets going right off the bat. There's not a lot of lingering at the beginning of it. Pretty much starts off with the main girls that you see in the trailer getting kidnapped, and you kind of learn more about their characters through flashbacks and the way they interact. So there's not a whole lot of build up to it, which was nice because it immediately gets into James McAvoy's character and the split personalities, and each one of those personalities kind of develops throughout the movie, which is kind of cool as well. Throughout the whole movie, I wasn't really 100% sure where it was going, and it really kept me on the edge of my seat the entire way. I thought James McAvoy looked kind of silly in the trailers, and like this would be a really terrible performance out of him. And while there were moments where I smiled or giggled at his performance a little bit, especially when he's playing a 10-year-old named Hedwig that you see a little bit in the trailer. It's amazing to me what he did, because just through his posture or his facial expressions or whatever, you can tell which personality is kind of at the helm of the body, the physical body at that moment. And that must have taken a lot of effort from him to kind of develop those different personalities to where the viewer can tell which one's in charge just by the way that he's using his body language as opposed to his words and the accents that he uses. I'm going to briefly touch on the twist, which I'm not going to spoil or anything. I will say it was spoiled for me before I went into the movie, because I guess as soon as it came out, comicbook.com thought they had free reign to just post it all over their site on what this twist meant and what it meant going forward for M. Night Shyamalan movies and so on and so forth. And I will say that it's a twist. Like, I put that in quotes, and I say it lightly because to me, it's not really a twist per se. There's a revelation that comes after the main title card of the movie. Like, the whole movie, there's no twist. And then it says the title card split. And then there's a small scene after that, which is what people are referring to as a twist. But to me, it's just kind of a PS. Kind of like where Sam Jackson shows up at the end of Iron Man and says,
it's just a stinger.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's more of a stinger than a twist, in my opinion. I personally had no problems with it, and I hope that it leads to something bigger, but again, I won't get into specifics about what it was. All in all, this is by no means a perfect movie or his best work, but it's definitely, to me, his best work in what seems like it's been over a decade. I would recommend watching it. I don't think that you need to go out to the theater and see it before it leaves theaters.
I won't.
But when it's on Netflix or whatever, or watch it for a Shocktober even, I think it's worth a watch. And I think James McAvoy was a lot better in it than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah, after The Visit, I'm just so jaded. I had heard such good things about that movie, and like you mentioned, everybody was kind of saying that it was his return to form, and then I saw it, and I was just like, really? We've lowered the bar that far?
Yeah.
I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But if we've lowered it that far, it's just it's pretty sad, because I really like Signs quite a lot, and like I said, The Village. Unbreakable is really cool. The Sixth Sense is definitely his most famous work, but I don't even think it's the best one. I really like Signs. I think at that point people were a little souring on him a little bit, especially with The Village, which I think is severely underrated. The Happening is just one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's awful.
And then, of course, I never saw Airbender. I never had any desire to see that, even though I don't think he wrote that one. Of course, it's based on the cartoon, the anime. And then After Earth, I don't know if he wrote that one either. But that was, from what I understand, was pretty bad as well.
Yeah, I never saw either of those, and I never saw Lady in the Water as well.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Lady in the Water. I remember liking that a lot when I saw it in theaters, and then I've watched it since, and it's not good. Like, I agree with a lot of people. Like, at the time, I was like, why is this movie getting shit on? It was pretty entertaining, but then I think I was just brainwashed because I liked him so much, and since I've seen it, I mean, it's probably been a couple of years since I've seen it, probably longer than that, but yeah, it's not great.
I'm with you. I would probably put Signs as my favorite. Yeah, I really like that movie. I like a good extraterrestrial movie, and that movie is probably one of the better ones.
So, oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyways, what are you into?
Well, those that subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you definitely should, it's basically just me doing Let's Plays at this point. We do unboxings every once in a while, and I'm going to start up the new Comic Book Day videos. I'm hoping next week. I've just been so far behind that I haven't, like, this week, I think it would have been Star Wars and Batman and the comic that I'm going to talk about. With comics, I am so far, I think I'm like 3 issues behind on both of those comics, so it wouldn't be much of a video this week. So hopefully I can start those again next week. But for those that do subscribe, you will know that I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil 7, which I think we've talked about this before on the podcast. I know it is a franchise that you like quite a lot, Tyler. I never really got into it. I'm sure I've shared this story before. I rented the first one, couldn't figure out how to get the controls not inverted, which is a silly reason to not like a franchise, but I was a kid and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so I put about 3 hours into it, and I was really disappointed and frustrated with it. And I just kind of returned it and never really got into the franchise because of that. Fast forward to Resident Evil 5. Tyler and I have gone on our mandate with Jake the Third Wheel, as I like to call him. We went and saw Wally, and then we became pretty good friends after that. And you, being a big fan of the franchise, brought over Resident Evil 5, and we played co-op. And that was the only Resident Evil game that I've ever beat. We played 6, but 6 is pretty repetitive, and I think we only got through like maybe a third of that game.
Yeah, they was broken up into the stories, and I want to say you and I played one of the stories.
I thought we started the second one, and then we just never. I honestly, it wasn't like I pushed the issue either, because it wasn't really that much fun. But I was pretty excited about this game because I had heard that they were changing up some of the dynamics of the franchise. They were going to go much more horror related, which Tyler and I do a whole month of Shocktober. We're big horror fans, so I was definitely excited about it. And I had also heard that they were changing it up as far as the gameplay is concerned. Like, this is first person, and then the other games were third person, and they're much more of a shoot 'em up, kind of like, not really a hack and slash because you have machine guns and handguns and stuff like that in the Resident Evil games, but sort of that same kind of dynamic where you're trying to get through these hordes of zombies or infected or whatever you want to call them. It reminds me a lot of like Left 4 Dead, those types of games. And this one is much more subtle. There's a lot more strategy. Not that there's anything wrong with those games. Like I said, I did like Resident Evil 5 quite a lot, and I like the Left 4 Dead games, but I also like these types of games, these more horror-related strategy type of games. Like, there's a lot in this game where you're running away from this guy because there's no reason to even waste your ammo because he's so much stronger than you. There's no sense in trying to like bash your head against the wall and just try to keep going at him when there's just no reason. You might as well just run around and kind of sneak around, and there's much more strategy involved. I mean, there are aspects of the game where you can just blast these like mold monsters is what I call them. I don't know I'm sure there's a technical term for them, but just blow them away with my shotgun, and that's a lot of fun. But then there's also a lot more strategy to it, and I just like the subtle horror aspect. It also doesn't hurt that the game is just beautiful looking. I mean, it's awful. Like, there's this creepy house, and it's disgusting, but it's also just beautiful in its own weird way as well.
Yeah, I am looking forward to eventually getting this and playing it. I'm on the other end of the spectrum, though, so I said it multiple times on the podcast before. Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
I really loved Resident Evil 5, playing it with you and being in the co-op, and I've played it through single player a couple times. Love that game. Resident Evil 6, I played all the stories by the time I was done with it, but it got a little repetitive, and it wasn't so much the gameplay that was repetitive in that game for me. It was that you were playing the same time frame with different sets of characters. I wish it would have just been a linear story. So Resident Evil 6 didn't go over because of that, and because Capcom, just completely reinvented the wheel and went back to basics and with Resident Evil 7. And while it looks like a lot of fun, I'm a little nervous to play it, and I'm a little nervous that I won't like it as much. So it's good. I've heard a lot of good things, and hearing that it's good from you is really reassuring. So I am going to play it. It definitely looks creepy, but I was a little bummed that they changed the dynamic from like the Resident Evil 4 game type.
Yeah, but I think at a certain point you kind of have to. Like, I mean, this is the 7th game. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. And as far as that particular story is concerned, like, how much further can you take it? It seemed like with 6, now I don't remember it very well, but it seemed like they kind of had taken it as far as they could, and they kind of have to start over a little bit.
Does it, I mean, I know that you're not done with it, right?
No, not so. I think I'm not even halfway yet.
I'm okay. Don't be specific, but does it tie into like the rest of the franchise
if it does, I don't know.
So it hasn't yet that you know of.
That I know. Now, again, I've only played 5 all the way through. Played a little bit of 1, 15, 20 years, however long it was. Probably been 20 years now. God damn it. So I only played a few hours of that, and then the 5th one is the only one that I've actually beaten, and then of course 6, which I don't really even remember. So if it does, I don't know. I've heard that it's happens in the same universe, but even the first cutscene, it doesn't seem like it does.
Does your character that you're playing as have a name or anything?
Ethan.
And are there cutscenes where your character talks, or is it more like a Half-Life where he's completely silent?
No, I mean he talks. Yeah,
okay. I was just curious. I'm gonna get it soon.
I mean, the whole thing is he has this girlfriend, or no, it's his wife, Mia, and apparently she's a babysitter because that's what grown women do now. I don't know. And she's something with this, like she's babysitting, and I don't know if she gets kidnapped or what. They're kind of vague on what happens, but she basically just gets kidnapped by by this family. I think they're called the Bakers, and they're just fucking psychopaths, and they have something weird going on with them. But I haven't gotten far enough in the game to kind of figure out what exactly they're talking. They keep referencing about their daughter and accepting their gift and all this weird shit. But I am more worried about getting away from them than kind of listening to their jibber jabber. So I haven't really picked up exactly what they're talking about. But from what I understand, it happens in the same universe, but it doesn't really tie in as far as I can see.
How's the scare factor?
There's been some jump scares here and there, but it's hard because we've talked about this in the past. We don't scare very easily, so as far as that's concerned, it's tough because I want to be scared, but it's tough for me to be scared. I mean, it's definitely creepy. It definitely has all those aspects of a good horror movie, like the music, the tension, the atmosphere is really cool. They do rely on a lot of jump scares, but it is pretty creepy.
Okay. I mean, I'll play it here soon for sure. It sounds interesting. I hope that towards the end of the game, it kind of comes together and ties into the other games in a certain way. But
sure, I've been doing my videos, and I did most of my videos this past weekend, and I plan on doing that again this weekend. So hopefully I plan on being done with it. Now, whether or not I can do that remains to be seen, but by the end of next week, I'll definitely be completely done with it. Because Halo Wars 2 comes out like the 17th, so I'll have to be done with Resident Evil before that comes out because I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
All right. So our next segment, like I kind of teased a little bit earlier, is comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week. We like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
So same story as the last couple weeks. I've been going through just getting caught up on different comic arcs because I was so far behind after the holidays. And this week I got caught up on Daredevil.
Okay, cool.
So I finished out the Muse story, which was the criminal artist that was making art out of gore pretty much. And I also finished the 2 most recent issues, which is a 2-parter called The Seventh Day. And I mean, my love for this comic has held up. I remember when this first started, this relaunch, I was talking about how Daredevil was one of my favorite comics out at that point, and I'd say that still holds true. Like this comic is still just surprising me. So the base, I'm going to focus mostly on the 7th day, which is Daredevil 15 and 16, and it's kind of Daredevil dealing with what happened in the Muse arc, which I am going to spoil. Are you caught up? Or
with the Muse arc, I am. Okay. That's where I stopped.
Okay, so I'm not going to spoil the 7th day, but the Muse arc ended long enough ago to where I am going to just spoil one plot point that plays pretty heavily into the 7th day. So if you don't want to hear that, check the show notes for when to skip ahead to. But at the end of the last issue of the arc with Muse as the villain, Blind Spot gets his eyes gouged out by the Muse.
Yep.
And this 2-issue story is kind of about how Daredevil deals with that grief and the blame he's putting on himself over what happened. It's a really cool short story where Daredevil really reflects on himself, and he reflects on Blind Spot, and he also delves into his past and really deals with his grief in this really cool way, which is obviously by trying to stop criminals, because that's what he does. But the way he goes about doing it is he goes to this cool little hole-in-the-wall villain bar, and he puts out a hit on himself to kind of just draw contract killers out so he can stop them. And he keeps getting these Z-list characters coming after him, as he puts it. And so he calls the person he set up the hit with and triples his money that he put on Daredevil's head. He had done it in disguise or whatever. And since you haven't read it, I won't spoil like what character comes out of the woodwork, but
my guess would be probably Bullseye, right?
I mean, that's a good guess. That's pretty much Daredevil's biggest villain.
Yeah.
But okay, so Bullseye ends up answering the call, and the story kind of goes from there. There's a lot of great stuff that's fit into these 2 issues, and it really explores Daredevil's psyche and his past and his faith. And I really recommend it. I'm excited to see where this comic goes, especially now that Blind Spot's incapacitated, to see what they do with him. But right now, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of cool to see Daredevil take a long, hard look at himself, and the final cliffhanger of issue 16 is going to answer a lot. It's promising to answer a lot of questions in coming issues that we have around Daredevil and why he got his secret identity back and how he did that and so on and so forth. So I'm excited for where it's going, and this 2-parter was pretty awesome.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not completely caught up on it yet. I got through the Muse stuff, but I hadn't gotten past that yet. This book, I liked it almost as much as you did when it first came out, but pretty much ever since, well, I mean, the 10-finger thing didn't really pay off the way I wanted it to, but I was still pretty happy with that. I think it kind of started going downhill for me when did he go to China? Whenever they played the poker game, that I didn't really like that much. And since then, it's kind of be hit or miss for me. I did really like the Muse stuff, though. I thought that was a pretty cool villain. The idea behind him, like basically taking these crime scenes and trying to make them like works of art. I thought that was really cool.
The one downside I will say to issues 15 and 16 is that I don't know if it was a permanent change, and I apologize, I don't know the name, but they did swap artists.
Okay.
And I really liked the artwork for issues 1 to 14 a lot more than in 15 and 16. So I don't know if somebody just stepped in for those 2 issues and the other guy's coming back, or if that's the artist that's here to stay. And again, I apologize, I don't know their names. But the artwork did kind of go down a little.
Okay.
All right, man. What'd you read?
Well, it should come as no surprise. I read Planet of the Apes Green Lantern, number 1. I just feel like, as a big Planet of the Apes fan, it's kind of in vogue right now to do crossovers with them. I don't know why, but I love it. I feel like I'm obligated to talk about them. But I've talked about the Star Trek one that I think was a couple of years ago, and then they just recently last year did one with Tarzan. Neither of those franchises I'm a huge fan of. I do like Star Trek a lot more than Tarzan. I mean, literally Tarzan could drop off a cliff and I could care fucking less about it. But I was actually surprised at how much I liked that crossover as well. But that's because I love Planet of the Apes. Unfortunately, I think my bias against DC is going to show a little bit, because I really just don't think I like Green Lantern that much, because I liked Star Trek and I liked the Tarzan one because they felt more like, at the very least, they felt like Planet of the Apes and Star Trek or Tarzan felt like equal parts in the story. Now, I know it's just issue 1, but it felt like this was much more of a Green Lantern story that just so happened to have Cornelius, one of the apes from the original Planet of the Apes, in it. And when I first heard about this, that they were going to be doing this a while back, my first thought was, okay, well, how are they going to do it? And literally the first thing that popped in my head, oh, they're going to give an ape a ring. I don't want to spoil anything, but it happens pretty early in issue 1.
It's on the cover, I think, too, isn't it?
Yeah, but with cover art, that never really means a whole lot. But they give an ape a ring. And I mean, it's like, as far as a writer, like, I don't consider myself a writer by any means, but like when I write jokes and stuff like that, like the first thing that pops in my head, I usually try to push past that and get to the better joke, the more subtle or thought out joke. And I just feel like if the first thing that popped in my head is exactly what they did, it just doesn't seem like it's all that creative. Now, I don't know what they're doing because I'm not going to continue reading this after issue 1. Just like I said, it's just too much of a Green Lantern story. For Green Lantern fans, I think they would really like it because it's not a bad book. I mean, it's the artwork is really cool. I really liked how they drew the apes. I thought that was pretty cool. And there's some really cool like space battles in this book. If you like Green Lantern, I just really did not care for it.
Yeah, that's a bit of a bummer. Like this wasn't something I was gonna be reading, but I had saw a review that praised it. And I was like, well,
yeah, it's not a bad book.
Like the final test would be Pat because he's such a big Planet of the Apes fan. So I wanted this to be good for you, but it doesn't mean one thing to me.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to read it.
Like I said, it's not a bad book. They do give an ape a ring, but they kind of do it in a weird way, and he almost becomes a villain because of it. And so I'm interested to see where, well, I guess interested is a strong word because I'm not going to read the rest of this miniseries, but I would be curious to find out how that went down in further issues, but it just doesn't seem like it's a Planet of the Apes story. It seems like a Green Lantern story that just so happens to take kind of a back seat within the Planet of the Apes universe.
Gotcha.
All right, so you ready for nerd news?
Yeah, so every week we discuss the big nerd headlines that happened since the last time we spoke. Today is no different. I have a few stories. Nothing too crazy except for the first one, which was pretty big. Ben Affleck dropped out of directing The Batman. Yep. Which completely caught me off guard, but the more I thought about it, the more it kind of makes sense. They put out a press release and all that stuff that they do when things like this happens, and he wrote some bullshit about how he's still attached to write, star in, and produce, but he wanted to focus on those things, so he was handing over the reins to direct to someone else, a yet to be named person. And to me it kind of makes sense. Like this movie's kind of like whenever he was promoting Live by Night, that's all that was out there. That's all people asked him about. And I think that that wore on him. And then Live by Night wasn't recepted very well. So, he's kind of had a couple not great things happen in a row at this point. Batman v Superman wasn't recepted very well. Live by Night, his directorial. What was the last thing he directed before Live by Night? Probably, was it Argo, or was there something in between there?
I want to say there was something in between there. But it may have been Argo.
Either way, he went from directing a movie that won Best Picture to Live by Night, which was kind of dumped in January and didn't receive any critical acclaim. So I think that he feels like he might be on a slippery slope. And if the next movie he directs is The Batman, and obviously that's not going to get any critical acclaim, superhero movies rarely do, he could maybe be cornering himself in like his career did 15 years ago. So it kind of makes sense. I think he's probably contractually obligated to star in and, be a part of this project, but I don't think that he wants this to be his next directorial effort.
First of all, I wasn't that surprised by it. It just seems like that was where the momentum was going, just where because they had come out a while back and said that he might not be directing it, and then of course he squashed those rumors pretty quickly, and now it's come out that he's definitely not going to direct it. But I wonder if because Live by Night didn't do as well, obviously all of these guys have a bunch of different projects that they're kind of juggling all at the same time. I know we both listen to a lot of Kevin Smith podcasts, and he's constantly talking about, he's got this in the works, he got that in the works, he still wants to do Clerks 3, he still wants to do Mallrats 2 as a TV series, and like he always seems like he's juggling a bunch of stuff. But I would maybe guess that he maybe thought that Live by Night didn't get well received because he was also working on the Batman. I don't know his thought process, but it seemed like that may have played a part. Obviously, I'm just speculating, but I wonder if that had anything to do with his thought process.
Yeah, I looked, and the last thing that he directed was Argo.
Okay.
So you go from directing the Best Picture to Live by Night, and then your next one after that's the Batman. And I don't know. I think that that's a slippery slope for him. And while he probably enjoys to a certain extent playing Batman, he's probably reevaluating some choices at this point, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it just seemed like that overshadowed everything. I mean, we talked about that before. I mean, he was having interviews about Live by Night, and all they wanted to talk about was Batman. So it probably got pretty frustrating.
For sure. This is a smaller story. I don't think there's too much we can really say about it because this guy hasn't really been in a whole lot. But Yahya Abdul-Mateen II has been cast as Black Manta in Aquaman, which, I mean, that's like the only Aquaman villain that exists, right? So
yeah,
pretty much
the only one that I could have ever named.
He's not been in hardly anything. He was in something called Sydney Hall, a show called The Get Down. And then apparently he's in Baywatch this summer, but there's not much that has been in. So it's pretty big.
The Get Down was the Netflix Jaden Smith show.
Is that what it is?
I'm almost positive that's. I mean, I never watched it. I mean, it looked weird, but I've never even heard of him. I saw that he got cast, obviously, but I kind of chalked it up as like, I mean, him being cast as Black Manta was a big deal. But the fact that Black Manta is going to be in the Aquaman movie wasn't a big deal because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm curious if he's kind of in it to set up him being the main villain in a future movie. I don't know that there's another person who had been cast as a villainous character, and I can't remember who it is or what character they're playing. But
trying to go like the Thor and Loki route where he becomes the bad guy in Avengers.
Yeah, something like that. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's like the only DC movie at this point that hasn't lost a director or needed a script rewrite. So it's like the one that seems like it's actually going to happen. So we'll see. And then the last thing I have is that they are making a Scarface remake, and it lost its director but gained a star. So I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, and I apologize. The director was Antoine Fuqua, who directed Magnificent Seven, Training Day, all of those movies. He dropped out to focus on The Equalizer 2, which he has in with, I guess, with Universal, and he couldn't get out of it, so he had to go make that with Denzel. And so they're looking for a director, but apparently Diego Luna, coming off of Rogue One, is attached to star as, I don't know if it'll be Tony Montana or what the name of the main character will be, but that's who he'll be playing.
I think they cast it well. I am just not a fan of Scarface. To be honest with you, I understand why people like it. Like, I understand I'm going to sound like a douchebag.
The gangster appeal?
Yes. I understand the people that are drawn to this movie, but I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's that great of a movie in a vacuum. Like, forget all the other shit that's attached to it. I just don't think it's that well put together of a movie. I mean, Al Pacino's good in it, but I just don't get the acclaim for it. Of course, they're going to remake it because it's so popular. I think he's a good choice. I think they casted well, but who knows?
Yeah, I think Diego Luna's a good choice as well. I know they're moving it from Miami to LA. So, whereas Tony Montana comes from Cuba, which is close to Florida, that makes sense. And Diego Luna, I believe, is Mexican. So coming across the border from Mexico to California and becoming a gangster makes sense for the West Coast. I don't know. I think he'll pull it off. But if he says, "Say hello to my little friend," like, I'm not seeing it. Like,
he's going to, like, for sure.
If you're going to remake a movie of that caliber, don't fucking put the catchphrase in. Do something on your own.
But you have to. Like, people are going to see it. The douchebags that I referred to earlier are going to see this, and if they don't do it, they're going to be like, "What the fuck? He didn't even say the thing that we love this movie for." But people like us are going to see it that don't have any attachment to it and are going to cringe if he does say it.
Yeah, there's no way to deliver that line. It's just, if you're going to do this movie, the first one, or not, it's not even the first one. It's a remake of a 1930s movie. The one with Al Pacino is just so iconic and so on its own that you have to do something different and make it your own and kind of it be in vein of that movie. So, but they won't. It'll just be like a nostalgia thing and a grab for cash. So,
yeah, for sure.
All right, man. That's all I got.
All right. So every episode at this point, we just kind of do our main topic. It changes from episode to episode. And we are actually going to review a Netflix show called Series of Unfortunate Events. Season 1 was released on January 13th on Netflix. Like I said, it was 8 episodes that cover the first 4 books of the series, the book series of the same name, written by Daniel Handler, under the pen name Lemony Snicket. It stars Neil Patrick Harris as Count Olaf, who adopts the 3 Baudelaire orphans, Violet, Klaus, and the infant Sonny, when they lose their house and parents to a suspicious fire. So, well, first of all, what do you feel about like going into to watching the TV series?
I wasn't very excited for it. I've not read the books.
Okay.
So I'll get that out there first. Like, I'm not familiar with the source material. I saw the Jim Carrey movie.
Oh, really? I'd never seen the movie.
I saw it in theaters when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it since. And I remember not liking it as a kid, mostly because I think...
Was that 2004?
So then I wouldn't have actually been a kid if it was.
I was gonna say
I was like a freshman in high school.
I knew it had been like 10 years, but I don't know.
Why did I go see that movie when I was a freshman in high school? Maybe I was expecting like Dumb and Dumber or something, and I don't know. I don't know what my thought process was then.
Yes, it was 2004.
Yeah, so I would have been a freshman in high school. So no wonder
I would have been a junior. Now that we've got that established.
But yeah, going into it, I wasn't very excited because I didn't know what they would do to set themselves apart from the movie, and I don't know why I thought that, because I couldn't tell you a single plot point from the movie. It's been so long, but I don't know. I thought that it was a weird thing to be making.
Yeah, honestly, I had forgotten that they were even doing it until it was released, and I had heard some really good things. I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. My wife wanted to watch it, so we sat down and watched the first couple of episodes, and she liked it a lot more than I did, and so she kind of took off and watched the rest of it, and I kind of slowly made my way through it. I actually liked it enough to listen to the first book on Audible. They're really short. Like, I think the longest one on Audible is like not even 6 hours, where I'm listening to the Harry Potter books that are like 26 hours.
Yeah.
So it's a big difference. So I listened to the first book in like a day at work because it was like 3 hours long. So it's pretty much, I mean, obviously not page for page, but I mean, the first 2 episodes are basically the first book. And that's kind of how it lays out. Is, from what I understand, I didn't continue with the books, but it seems like that's kind of how they did it. Every couple episodes is the next book.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate that it stayed true to the source material. Then,
yeah, I mean, it's straight up an adaptation as true as you can adapt something.
Are they very old books? Because Lemony Snicket, or I forgot, is the pen name of that author, and I guess Daniel something, but he's not very old.
Handler.
Yeah, he's not a very old guy, so the books can't be that incredibly old, are they?
I do not know.
I would guess the 90s.
Yeah, something like that. Probably around the same time as Harry Potter. Around that. Maybe a little bit younger than those books. But so each review we kind of start off by giving a general overview. We call it broad strokes. So how'd you feel about that?
So, like I said, not knowing the source material, not being very excited for this show, I didn't know what to expect. Like your wife, my wife really took to it. She watched like the whole thing in 2 nights. So I think she enjoyed it a lot more than I did. This show has amazing cinematography. I'm going to start off with positive stuff. It's really good looking. It was a lot of fun to watch in that regard. The actors in this show really go for it, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. We'll get into that whenever we get into the performances. But when it comes down to it, I thought the show was really boring, and I didn't find myself caring at all for any of the characters, either good or bad. To me, and I don't know if this is how the books are, maybe you can speak to this, but to me it felt like a Wes Anderson ripoff. just the way that it's acted in and shown and the way that the story progresses. It's like Wes Anderson shot this show, and I don't believe he has any part of it. But it felt like watching one of his movies without the originality. I'm sure that people that love the source material appreciate this show because, again, like you said, it stays very close to the books, at least the first one that we know for sure. But as someone who went into it cold, it wasn't for me. And I'm trying to put my thumb on why. But by episode 8, it was a chore to watch. And if it wasn't for us reviewing it on this podcast, I probably wouldn't have finished it.
I think boring is a little harsh. I don't necessarily think that it was, I don't know. I will agree with you that by the last episode, I was like, okay, let's get on with it. And most of that's due to the fact that I don't think it's necessarily boring, but it was repetitive.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Because basically what happens, and it makes sense, and I'll get a little more into this when we talk about the story, but basically every couple episodes is one book, and very, very similar things happen to these children every book, from what I gather from the show and read while listening to the first book. So it would make sense that it was, when you binge watch it, you see those things happening over and over again. It's easier to kind of pinpoint those when you're binge watching it over 8 40-minute episodes versus reading a book. But I actually felt pretty similar after I was done watching this to when I watch a really well put together and really well written animated movie. Like, I felt like the theme for kids was pretty strong, kind of the theme of perseverance despite basically all odds, which is a pretty good theme for kids to learn given what's going on right now. But and I also thought that there was enough like dark kind of sarcastic humor for adults. So I think, and like you said, it was cinematography was really great. So it was fun to look at. So for film buffs and TV buffs, there was things to kind of appreciate as far as that was concerned. So I definitely think that it was a good show for kids and adults, despite being very, very repetitive.
Cool.
All right. So let's dive right into the story.
So, I mean, I didn't have a lot for the story, but the main point you made in your broad strokes was that it was, to me, very repetitive. And again, I binged this within the last 3 days. So to your point, I did watch all of these episodes basically back to back. But whenever a season of a show is 8 episodes long and it feels too long, I think that's saying something.
Oh yeah, that's a problem there.
This is the same amount of episodes as Stranger Things, and by the end of Stranger Things, I was all in. And with this show, I was ready for it to be over. And it's a very short season of television, so I think that speaks a lot to the story. I mean, every 2 episodes is a repeat of the last episode. The kids
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the gist of this show is the kids get sent to a new relative. Count Olaf shows up in a disguise. The adults don't believe the children that it's Count Olaf. Stuff ensues, and their caregiver can't take care of them anymore, and they're sent to the next place. And things kind of start to wrap up, of course, in episodes 7 and 8, and the story follows a little bit of a different plot line, but not enough to save the show. As I was watching it, I was just like, all right, now this is going to happen, now this is going to happen. Oh, here's Count Olaf in a crazy costume. And it just, to me, the repetitiveness of it really took away from it. And if that's how the books are, and if people love it, the books being that way, then more power to the fans of this. But for me, it's not something that I'm nostalgic of. It's not something that I'm super into. So it didn't play well to me at all.
Yeah, I think, of course, I agree with the being repetitive, because that was a point that I also make. But like I said, with the books, like reading the books, now granted they are short books, it's probably a lot harder to pinpoint that they are repetitive, because like you said, when you're binge watching all of this, now I binged it when it first came out. I watched the first like 3 or 4 episodes, and then I kind of slowly watched an episode every couple of days, and eventually watched, I think, the last one earlier this week. So it took me a while to get through it, which again is not a good sign for a season of television that's only 8 episodes. So it's a lot easier for you to pinpoint, oh, this feels repetitive, this feels stale or whatnot. But by the lumber mill, I was just like, come on, guys. Like, yeah. I mean, this is for sure exactly what just happened.
Yep.
And so that was disappointing. But I feel like there's enough threads that didn't necessarily get fleshed out very well in this first season that could come up later in the second and third season. I know that it's already been renewed for the first, I think, for 2 more seasons at least. And I think there's enough in there. There's enough mystery, especially with that kind of final cliffhanger. You're going to find out a lot more about Count Olaf in the second season. And then there's a whole thing with their parents, whether or not they're really dead. And then there's a spoiler, or not a spoiler, a twist towards I think it was like the second to last episode that you find out. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, but I liked that aspect because they do kind of beat you over the head with the fact that it's not a happy ending, and they kind of tease this happy ending. And so I kind of liked how that paid off. I do think it was a little bit too cute the way they did it with the doors. But other than that, I didn't mind that. I kind of liked having that thread kind of throughout the 8 episodes that kind of gave you a break from the children a little bit, and kind of the repetitive nature of their arcs. But for the most part, there was enough to keep me entertained. But like I said, with the story, it was a little bit repetitive. I find it kind of ironic that I keep repeating repetitive. But anyways, I did like the Lemony Snicket stuff. I'd like to see his character fleshed out a little bit more. Like I said, there's a cliffhanger at the end of episode 8 that involves him that I think we're gonna get more of in the second season. And I will watch the second season. I doubt you will. Probably not.
I don't know. We'll see.
But yeah. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that particular character. And Tim Curry actually does the narration. He plays that character in the book, the audio book. So I thought that was pretty cool. I liked that, being a big Rocky Horror fan. But yeah, it's the story arc with the kids. It's basically just the same thing 4 different times.
Yep. I would hope that if the second season, well, it sounds like it is a go, but whenever it comes about, they take it a somewhat different direction. And I know that will depend on what the books did. It seems like the children are going in a different direction. But if it's just them getting shuffled around again, I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah. So from what I understand, this season covers the first 4 books. And then the second season, I don't know how many books it covers, but that's how they're breaking it down.
How many fucking books are there?
13.
Jesus Christ.
They're super, super short.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, when I watch this show, I know that you're saying it's great for kids and adults. I didn't view it as a kid's show, and maybe if I had viewed it through
it's a little dark for a kid's show.
I mean, whenever he stabs the suitcase with the baby in it, but I mean, the baby's not in it, but it's insinuated that he may have killed the baby.
Yeah.
That's when
he kills a person.
So I didn't watch it through the prism of it being like for kids. So maybe that's why I'm being so hard on it. But it sounds like the books are for kids. Like if you were to, I know this is a stretch, but look at the TV show Arthur. Like those are based on kids' books, and I'm sure as an adult, if you watch it, it's very repetitive because each episode is Arthur learning a lesson. His little sister's going to be annoying, and he interacts with his classmates, and that's pretty much how the show goes. So maybe if you look at it through that prism, like you can kind of explain it. But these are like 45-minute episode. Like it's pretty dark. I don't know that it can use that as a crutch.
I mean, I can see that. We agree that it's repetitive, so it's almost like you want me to argue with a point that I made.
No, I'm trying to make sense of where the critical acclaim of the show is coming from, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the show. I won't go as strongly as I think some of the stuff that I've read about it. Like, that was the only reason I even watched it to begin with, was because, like I said, I didn't even know it was coming out. I've never seen the movie, never read the books prior to this.
Yeah.
I had no interest in it whatsoever. I didn't even know what it was about. Then I heard some really good things about it. And then I was like, what the hell? And I wanted to watch it, like I said. But I don't feel as strongly as some other critics do, obviously. But I do think that there's some redeeming qualities to it. I do like the sarcastic nature. The dark comedy. I really enjoyed that. I do think, like I said, the theme is there that's strong for kids, like perseverance and whatnot. Because the kids do go through a lot of shit. And they kind of they don't rely on grown-ups to help them. They kind of help themselves, and they persevere. And I think that's a good message for kids. So I think in that aspect, it's a kid's story, but at the same time, it is pretty dark.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there's a lot of like sarcastic jokes that even as a teenager, I might not get.
Yeah, I agree. I will say that all of the hate that I'm putting out there for this show, I did appreciate a lot of the sarcastic jokes. And
I really liked the gag where they told them what the words meant. I really thought that gag was really funny. I mean, they play it out towards the end, but I thought that was really funny that he kept like, I know what that word means. I just thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah, there were definitely parts throughout this show that I thought were clever and I thought were funny. It was too few and far between for me to hold my interest, I guess.
Okay, so performances, and for me, this is probably, other than maybe the cinematography, this is probably the strongest aspect of the show.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about the performances. I thought Neil Patrick Harris was great, and he really made some choices, and
you said it like he made some bad choices.
I mean, the whole show is the way that the actors portray the characters is just, I couldn't help but keep comparing it to a Wes Anderson movie. It felt so much like a Wes Anderson movie to me, and I like Wes Anderson and I like his movies. So
you keep saying that like it's a bad thing.
No, so I do like the way the show is put together, but I feel like he has such a unique style that it felt kind of like a ripoff, in my opinion. That being said, I thought that for the most part, the performances were good, especially Neil Patrick Harris. I thought that he was great as Count Olaf, probably even better than Jim Carrey was in the movie. He kind of took a role that's already been played and made it his own. The other standout for me, and we'll get into it whenever we talk about our episodes, our standout episodes. I don't remember how to pronounce his name, but he was on The Daily Show. Aziz Mandivi.
Oh, yeah.
I really like him a lot. He's not been in a whole lot outside of The Daily Show that I've seen, so it was cool to see him in a couple episodes. It'd be awesome. Rhys Darby's always awesome. I've talked about how much I love Flight of Conchords. And
unfortunately, he was the lumber mill story arc, which he was. At that point had been played out.
Yeah, but all in all, I was really pleased with the performances. Like I said, they all made choices and went for it. I don't have any specific examples, but there were times where it was kind of cringeworthy acting, but for the most part, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Neil Patrick Harris in this. He reminded me of, I don't want to say Barney. I mean, he kind of had that same, like, he did a lot of stuff with his face, like facial expressions and whatnot. So I thought he made that work really well. The kids weren't horrible, which is kind of kid acting. To say they're not bad, it kind of makes them good, because I mean, kid acting is always hit or miss. The baby thing, now, I mean, this is not acting because it's a baby, so what are you gonna do? But that's one thing that I thought was pretty annoying. I did not think that gag was funny at all.
What blows my mind is I was going through the credits for A Series of Unfortunate Events, and they brought Tara Strong in to make the baby noises.
Really? I did not know that.
Which are few and far between and carry no weight for the show. And she's a pretty well-known voice actor, so to get her to come in and make goo-goos and gagas just blows my mind that, one, she was willing to do it, and two, that they paid her to do it. Because I'm sure
that's probably why she was willing to do it.
Well, I'm sure you could Google search free audio clips of baby noises, and it would have made no difference to use those.
Sure. Yeah, the two gags with the kid or the baby did not work for me whatsoever.
What two gags are you talking about? I mean, when she makes noise in their subtitles?
Yes.
Or are you talking about whenever she's working at the lumber mill?
All of that with her teeth. All of it. Yeah. I mean, it's not just in the lumber mill. I mean, that's the most drastic part of it. But yeah, none of those gags with the baby worked at all for me.
Not at all.
But so I thought the kids were all right. They weren't bad. One of the standouts for me, and it's just because I'm personally a fan of this particular person, is Patrick Warburton, who plays one of my favorite side characters in Seinfeld, David Puddy. He's awesome in that show, and he's so well casted as the narrator Lemony Snicket, just that really kind of just dull, monotone voice.
Yeah.
Just works so well as a narrator. And the fact that he just really doesn't want to tell this story and he kind of feels like he's obligated to, and he just kind of has that voice of somebody that doesn't want to be here.
Yeah.
And so it works so well. And I just like his kind of dry humor throughout the show. So I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, I like him a lot as well. He doesn't age.
No, it doesn't seem like he does.
But he's great.
That's pretty much it. I guess we'll go on and talk about the notable episodes.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot for my notable episodes. I'm just going to call out 2, and they're both part of the same. This show is split up into part 1s and part 2s. 4
story
times.
arcs. Yeah.
Sure, that one. The reptile room, which involves the kids being. It's as soon as they're taken basically away from Count Olaf and given to their uncle Monty, who again is played by somebody I called out in performances, Aziz. I cannot pronounce his last name. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but we'll just go with Mandivi. I really liked his performance in this show and really liked his interaction with the kids. And I thought it was cool the way he had the reptile house and the kids were in there. And, I really enjoyed the way that arc played out because to me it was still fresh.
Yeah.
Oh, look, they got shuffled off to their uncle, and look, Count Olaf did show up, and he has a crazy costume, and people don't believe, and it's still funny, and it hadn't been beaten into my skull yet. So I was still enjoying the show at that point. So that's why I had to call out these 2 episodes.
And he's the only one that actually believes them.
Yeah, exactly. And I forget what's the name of the person that works for child services or whatever. Is it Poe?
Yeah, he works for the bank.
The bank.
Mr. Poe is his name, yeah.
Mr. Poe, sorry.
Yeah. It's a Mr. Poe to you.
I mean, he just consistently doesn't believe the kids, and it's funny at first. So I was still enjoying the show in these 2 episodes and was excited to see where it went. So I'm just reminiscing about a more pleasant time within watching this show. So those are my 2 episode standouts.
Yeah, and this show, for the most part, we've talked about the cinematography a little bit. It's really dark. There's not a ton of bright colors, and those 2 episodes are kind of the only 2 that really have that kind of jump out as far as the color choices. He has that garden that's that weird maze, so that's a bright green, and then his reptile room that has bright colors. So it's really the only 2 episodes that kind of stand out as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
The 2 episodes that I'm going to pick, I'm going to kind of cop out. I'm going to pick the first episode because that was the one that that's my favorite episode. Like, it kind of blew me away, just how funny it was, just different than a lot of shows that I've seen before. I had never seen the movie, like I said, so I didn't really know what to expect, and I kind of just immediately got excited for this show. Yeah. Unfortunately, that waned, like we've talked about a little bit. So I really liked the first episode. It hooked me. Unfortunately, like I said, it doesn't really hold up very well. And then I'm going to talk about, even though I didn't like the story arc, I wanted to talk about the first Miserable Mill, which is the lumber mill episode, just because that is the episode where you find out a pretty big thing in the thing that they'd been teasing. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, but I really liked that story arc and how they basically tricked us.
Yeah.
Didn't really trick us because they'd been telling us the entire time. So I just really liked that because it kind of went against what you thought was going to happen. Even though they've been telling us it wasn't going to be a happy ending, you just assumed that it was going to be a happy ending because that's what TV does.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that kind of went with that. And I think it was the first part. Maybe it was the second part.
It was the first.
Okay, cool.
It ends with that.
I was pretty sure it was the end of the Miserable Mill Part 1. So I liked those 2 episodes.
Awesome.
I also like the Reptile Room as well.
I will say probably one of my, and this is such a dumb thing to laugh at, but one of my favorite jokes in the whole show was in episode 2, where it shows him going to the bank and he says he's Jessica haircut.
Yes.
It's such a silly gag.
It's such a played out bit,
I mean, I won't lie. I laughed at it for sure. So to me, that was one of the funnier jokes.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So star rating. What'd you feel about Series of Unfortunate Events?
I would say if you're a fan of the books, I would recommend it. So I'd give you 3 stars. But just from my own perspective, my own opinions, I have to give it a 2.5.
I feel like we've said this a million times, we tend to dwell on the negative when we review.
We do.
I don't know why.
We're negative people.
I guess. So the star rating might kind of not necessarily blow you away, but I'm going to give it 3.5.
Okay.
There was a lot in this show that I did like, and I will watch the second season. If it continues to be, like we said, kind of the same thing over and over again. I didn't want to use the word repetitive again. Yeah, so if it continues to do that, then I obviously won't watch the third season, and I'll kind of give up on it. But for now, I think there was enough good there to kind of make up for the repetitive nature of the show.
Cool.
All right, so last but not least, we're going to kind of end the show like we always do with a nerd favorite. Tyler and I take turns asking each other a really nerdy question. It's my week since I talked about a crossover event, comic event. In my comic section, I'm going to ask you what your favorite comic crossover. I know they're kind of a weird thing in the comic book culture, so I'm going to take like a true comic book crossover, but I know there's not a ton of good ones out there, so kind of whatever you want to do with it, go for it. But it's actually going to be kind of a cop-out because I think it just came out last year, but and we talked a lot about it on the podcast when it was when the issues were being released. But I really dug Batman TMNT, that crossover. It's two of my favorite franchises, characters, however you want to say it, of all time. I mean, maybe if they could have done a 3-way with Spider-Man, it would have been perfect. But they just did Batman TMNT, and it really works because Batman's kind of this dark and brooding character, and TMNT in the comic book universe is kind of more Batman than people think of. When you think of TMNT, you think of the really kind of fun cartoon, and they can be, and that is cool in its own way. I mean, I fell in love with that show. I still love that show. I have cartoon Donatello tattooed on me, but the comic book is a little bit different. It's kind of its own beast, and I do appreciate that. So those characters do actually work really well with each other. And I think when team-ups or crossovers work best, it's when you kind of have the straight guy, the dark and brooding character, and then you kind of have the jokester and the TMNT, Donatello and Michelangelo, and those guys played off Batman really well. Now I know you had a problem in the last couple of issues, and it does get really fucking crazy towards the end, but I really liked the Shredder Batman villain thing that they had going. And it didn't really bother me the last couple of issues. It does kind of take a weird turn. But with these team up and crossovers, whatever you want to call them, they're usually almost exclusively non-canon. So you can just kind of have fun with it. And that's my thoughts. I didn't think that they took themselves too seriously and they were just kind of having fun with it. So I didn't really think too much into it, but I know that you had your problems with it.
Yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I thought that it started out really great, and then whenever Batman villains start turning into animals, I was done. Yeah, I finished it out, but I was done. For me, I think that Batman TMNT is the only like cross-publisher crossover I've ever read.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know that I've read any others off the top of my head.
They were popular a long time ago, before our time, basically. Yeah, I mean they still do them, but yeah, they're not quite in vogue like they used to be.
And most of the ones that are happening now, I'm not interested in. Of course, Batman TMNT, I was all over that because I love both franchises. But like they just did like a Power Rangers Justice League one. Yeah, I have no interest.
I have no desire for that.
The ones that you've talked about with Planet of the Apes, I'm not interested in. So for me, I'm gonna have to stick with like an inner publisher crossover. And I mean, you could kind of twist this any way you want. Like, you could say Dark Knight Returns is a crossover because it's Batman and Superman, but I'm not going to be that loosey-goosey with it.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and just because it's on the tip of my brain, because like Batman TMNT, it happened last year, I'm going to go with Daredevil Punisher.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that one.
It's just a few issues, but it's really solid storytelling. And we talked about it on the podcast. I believe I talked about most of the issues through our comic segment, but what could have been a comic just trying to be a money grab because of the crossover in Daredevil season 2 with Punisher. It told a really awesome story where Daredevil and Punisher were each fighting crime in their own way and came across each other's paths and had to fight, and because they didn't see eye to eye on killing a mob boss that Daredevil was trying to get to the airport because he was going to be imprisoned in Texas, and Punisher was, of course, in all of his Punisher glory, trying to kill the guy before they get to the airport. So just really cool character dynamics. I love that those characters respect each other, but constantly, I don't want to say do battle, but constantly getting in each other's ways because they don't agree with the other person on how they do things. So it was a lot of fun to watch that. Or read that, and the art in that book, those few books is beautiful. So if you didn't, I'd read it. I'd strongly recommend it because, again, it's so new that you could probably go to your local comic book shop and find almost all the issues. I'm sure that there's a better crossover out there, but that one's definitely at the front of my mind because, again, it's newer, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a good one. That wasn't something that I considered when I kind of thought of this.
Yeah.
But it's a good one. I was thinking of, like I said, more traditional, like crossover as far as publishers are concerned, but that's definitely a good one. I really enjoyed that. I'm sad that it didn't really continue because I thought it was going to, and then I just never heard anything else about it. And it was kind of my substitute for that really bad Punisher book that neither one of us liked. And then it just never continued. So it's kind of sad that I don't have a Punisher book right now. But the main title was so bad that I couldn't stick with it.
No, I ditched that one after one issue.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for episode 127. Yes, 127 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. As always, we appreciate it if you followed us on Twitter and Instagram. Both are at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like I said, I'm doing Let's Plays for Resident Evil 7. I will be starting Let's Plays for Halo Wars 2 as well when that comes out. And I'll hopefully be starting my new Comic Book Day videos weekly starting next week again. Check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream Monday at 9 p.m. Central. Subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. And you can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.